Welcome back to Vuln Vibes. In this episode, we are going to talk about Cisco ISE hack. We're doing a deep dive today into, well, a pretty critical advisory that just landed. It's Cisco says RAD suppressed AS 8YF3JTHH. And this isn't just, another minor bug. This is a high-severity issue hitting Cisco Identity Services Engine ISE. That's the heart of network access control for so many places. So our mission today is pretty clear. Quickly triage this, understand why this logic flaw is so dangerous, and map out the immediate steps for mitigation and remediation. Basically what you need to do now.
Absolutely. When something hits your core access control terrain like this, the risk isn't just theoretical data loss, it's potential operational standstill. This denial of service vector is particularly nasty. It targets availability right at the top. The official name is the Cisco Identity Services Engine Radius Suppression Denial of Service Vulnerability. Quite a mouthful.
Yeah, it is. Let's get straight to the metrics, though, because that CVSS score, that tells the story of urgency for security teams.
It really does. We're looking at a CVSS base score of 8.6. That's firmly in the high category. But let's break down that vector string for the network defenders listening. AVNALPR.NUI-NFAC-NINAH. Now that string, it waves a few red flags immediately. Look at PRN and AVN.
Unauthenticated and remote.
Exactly. No credentials needed, exploitable from across the network, and the impact, high availability impact. This isn't just slowing things down, it causes the critical IC node itself to, well, crash and restart unexpectedly.
Ouch.
Yeah. If you rely on IC for policy enforcement, think about it. Your network segmentation, your access control, it just vanishes during that reboot cycle.
That's pretty much the nightmare scenario, isn't it? An unauth DoS taking out the very thing that's supposed to be your gatekeeper. And we've got the identifiers too, CVE-2025-20343. And it's categorized under CWE-697.
That CWE-697, that should definitely make network architects sit up. It points directly to an incorrect comparison or, more broadly, a fundamental logic error.
Okay, so let's unpack that logic flaw then. The advisory mentions this logic error, CWE-697. What's the specific mechanism here? What feature designed for security actually opened this door?
Well, that's the really ironic part of this whole thing. The vulnerability lies within a feature that was meant to be defensive. It's called reject radius requests from clients with repeated failures. It's a suppression logic.
Right, I know the one. It stops noisy clients from hammering eyes after they fail authentication multiple times.
Precisely. Cisco added it to prevent exactly that, rogue endpoints or maybe misconfigured devices flooding the ISE node, causing, a localized radius storm or a sort of soft DoS.
Right.
It was meant to protect against denial of service.
And yet
the root cause, that CWE-697 issue, pops up when ISE gets a new radius access request, specifically for a MAC address that's already on that suppressed list, the rejected endpoint list. There's a flaw in how ISE handles the state transition or maybe the indexing for that suppressed device when a new specific type of request comes in for it.
So instead of just dropping the packet like it's supposed to?
Right. Instead of cleanly rejecting it, an attacker crafts a very specific sequence, multiple radius access request messages sent in just the right order. This sequence hits that flawed logic path. It seems to cause some kind of confusion, maybe memory corruption or a state machine tangle, leading directly to the ISE process crashing.
And the whole node restarts.
The whole node restarts, yeah.
Wow. Okay, so the defense mechanism itself becomes the attack vector for a full system DoS. That really highlights a risk that comes with adding complex features, even defensive ones. And you mentioned a prerequisite. That suppression setting has to be active for this to work.
That's absolutely critical. The vulnerability only manifests if reject radius requests from clients with repeated failures is actually enabled.
But you also said it's on by default in the affected versions.
Exactly. That's the kicker. In the vulnerable releases, the setting is enabled right out of the box. So an attacker needs 0 credentials, just network reachability to the ISE radius port, UDP 1812 usually, and the ability to send that specially crafted sequence.
It really exploits that intended complexity, doesn't it? The state management for suppression.
It does. It's a stark reminder that error handling around these dynamic network states needs to be incredibly robust.
Okay, let's define the blast radius now. If you're listening and running IE, you need to know, am I exposed? Which versions are we talking about?
Right. The advisory is very specific here, which is helpful. The vulnerability impacts Cisco ISE releases 3.4.0.
First 3.4 release.
Yep. And 3.4 patch 1, 3.4 patch 2, and 3.4 patch 3. The key thing to understand is that this flaw is tied directly to the 3.4 release train because, as we discussed, that radius suppression feature, the one being exploited, it was introduced in release 3.4.0.
Ah, okay. That makes sense. So older versions are safe.
Correct. Releases 3.3 and earlier are completely exempt. They just don't have the vulnerable code path. And, importantly, if you're already on the newest major branch 3.5, you are also not vulnerable. Cisco confirmed that.
So the focus is squarely on anyone who migrated to 3.4.x recently?
Absolutely. If you move to 3.4, 3.4 patch 1, 2, or 3, you really need to assume you're at risk, especially given that default setting.
That link to a new feature in 3.4 is such a critical piece of information for risk assessment. It means people likely inherited this vulnerability just by upgrading through the default configuration.
Exactly. And to be certain, you need to verify your specific configuration. Don't just assume.
How do they check?
Okay, you need to log into your ISE web UI, navigate through the menus. Go to Administration, then System, then Settings.
Okay.
Under Settings, find Protocols, and then click on Radius. In there, you're looking for a specific section, usually titled something like Suppress Repeated Failed Clients and Repeated Accounting.
Got it.
Within that section, look for the checkbox labeled Reject Radius Requests from Clients with Repeated Failures. If that box is checked, your ISE node is vulnerable right now.
Okay, that check needs to happen like yesterday. So let's say someone confirms they are vulnerable, but maybe their change control window isn't until the weekend. What's the immediate workaround? Is there a quick operational fix?
Thankfully, yes. There's a direct workaround because it targets the prerequisite we talked about. Since the crash only happens if that specific suppression setting is active, well, the immediate mitigation is to disable it.
Just uncheck the box.
Essentially, yes. You navigate back to that same spot. Administration System Settings Protocols Radius, find the Suppress Repeated Failed Clients section again, and this time, you uncheck only that specific box. Reject Radius Requests from Clients with Repeated Failures.
Just that one.
Just that one. Unchecking it sidesteps the flawed logic path. It stops the crash vector without needing a full patch deployment or even an immediate restart.
Hold on, though. Disabling that feature.
Yeah.
It was put there for a reason, right? To stop radius floods. If you turn it off, aren't you potentially trading this specific DoS vulnerability?
For potential performance degradation from unsuppressed clients hammering the system?
Exactly. At a big, busy network with lots of devices, maybe some misconfigured, isn't that a significant trade-off? Are we just swapping a hard crash for like a slow, painful performance hit?
That is absolutely the critical trade-off assessment every architect needs to make right now. Yes. You are potentially trading the catastrophic crash risk for a performance degradation risk. If you have, let's say, poor endpoint hygiene or lots of devices that frequently fail authentication for whatever reason, disabling this could mean more load on your ISE nodes. They'll be processing failures they would have otherwise just suppressed and ignored after a point. Log volume might go up, CPU load might increase.
So the workaround isn't fire and forget.
Definitely not. It removes the immediate crash danger, but it shifts the burden back onto the main Radius engine. Cisco explicitly advises monitoring performance closely if you apply this workaround, and they also recommend re-enabling it once you do patch.
Understood. So mitigation is just temporary triage. The real fix, the stable path, is patching. What's the target release for change control?
The definitive fix requires upgrading any vulnerable 3.4 deployment to Cisco ISE Release 3.4 Patch 4.
Patch 4.
That's the official release where Cisco has corrected the underlying logic error, the CVE-2025-20343 issue. This upgrade really needs to be treated as mandatory for affected systems.
And what's the word on exploitation? Is this being actively used out there?
So according to the advisory itself, the Cisco PSR team is not aware of any public announcements or, more importantly, any malicious use of this CVE 2025-20343 in the wild.
That's good news, but
yeah, it's likely cold comfort, given how relatively straightforward it sounds to trigger unauthenticated remote DoS against a core appliance. That window of obscurity is probably very, very thin.
Right. If any proof of concept code drops publicly,
then the risk profile skyrockets immediately. Assume it's only a matter of time.
Okay, let's summarize the key takeaways for everyone listening. This vulnerability, it's critical. CVSS 8.6, it gives an unauthenticated attacker a remote way to crash your core network access control system, your ISE. The root cause is a logic bug in a security feature, the radius suppression logic, which is specific to the ISE 3.4 release train. There is a temporary workaround. Carefully disable just the reject radius requests from clients with repeated failure setting, but watch performance. However, full remediation is non-negotiable. You absolutely must plan to upgrade to 3.4 patch 4.
And connecting this to the bigger picture, it's just such a clear example of complexity creating new risks. You add these intricate security mechanisms like stateful suppression lists, and you inherently create more surface area for subtle logic flaws like the CVE-697.
The attempt to harden against one threat opens a door for another.
Precisely. It's a pattern we see again and again in critical infrastructure components. The defense itself becomes exploitable.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you, our listeners, especially the seasoned security architects out there. Consider this. This critical flaw hinges entirely on a new feature, introduced in a recent major version, and it was enabled by default. So how rigorous does your audit of default configurations need to be when you roll out any major vendor upgrade? Even if the feature's intent seems purely positive, can we implicitly trust that the vendor's default hardening doesn't carry its own hidden critical risks like this one? Something to definitely mull over as you're scheduling those urgent 3.4 patch 4 upgrades.